This is where the rubber hits the road and you learn how to actually change your habits. We'll break bad habits by making them harder and create good habits by making them easier. And we won't rely on motivation for behavior change, but rather intentional and well thought out systems to produce reliable results. As described by James Clear in Atomic Habits, there are 3 levels to behavior change: outcomes, processes, and identity. First, we have outcomes. Behavior change at the outcome level would be something like getting an A+ in organic chemistry or getting accepted to a top US medical school. Operating here is on the level of goals. One layer deeper, we have processes. This would include taking this pre-med roadmap course and watching a little bit every day to become the strongest and most competitive pre-med you can be. This can also be implementing a new routine at the gym. This level applies to changes in your habits. The third and final layer of behavior change is altering your identity. If you believe you are a fit and athletic person, or believe you are well suited to be a doctor, your behaviors and results will follow. This applies to changes in your beliefs. Changing your beliefs changes your identity, and this is the most powerful agent of change. To illustrate this point, take 2 people who are trying to quit drinking alcohol. When offered a brew at the local frat rager, the first person says, "No thanks, I'm trying to quit." The second person says, "No thanks, I'm not a drinker." This is a small and subtle difference, but the power of language here is tremendous. The goal is not to hit the gym 5 times per week, but rather to become a bodybuilder. The goal is not to get an A in organic chemistry, but to become an excellent student. The goal is not to publish a research article, but to become a future physician scientist. On the flip side, this can work against you. Be careful of saying things like, "I'm bad at physics," or "I'm not a morning person." To get an A in physics, or consistently wake up at 6 a.m., now results in cognitive dissonance, whereby your behaviors and beliefs contradict one another. You will subconsciously behave in a way to resolve the conflict, which often results in a behavior change that works against you. Alright, so it's becoming clear that changing your identity is one of the most powerful ways to catalyze behavior change. And how do we change our identity? The more you repeat a behavior, the more you reinforce the identity associated with that behavior. Each experience in life modifies your self-image, but I didn't consider myself a killer student after setting the curve in college for the first time. But as I began to consistently and repeatedly achieve stellar results, my self-image began to change. This is a gradual evolution. We don't change in one moment, but rather we change bit by bit, day by day, habit by habit. The most practical way to change who you are is to change what you do. Every time you write a page, you are a writer, and you are reinforcing this identity. But each time you engage in a bad habit, you're reinforcing that identity as well. Changing your identity is a simple 2-step process. First, decide the person you want to be. And second, prove it to yourself with small wins that reinforce that identity. But easier said than done. And that brings us to the 4 laws from Atomic Habits. To create good habits, the 4 laws are to 1. Make it obvious, make it attractive, make it easy, and make it satisfying. To break a bad habit, you simply use the inverse. So that would be to make it invisible, make it unattractive, make it difficult, and to make it unsatisfying. Let's break these down one by one. The first law, make it obvious. The cues that spark our habits are so common that they become invisible to our consciousness, just like the phone next to you while you study or the remote control next to the couch. In the operating room, we do timeout prior to making the first incision. The surgeon leads the healthcare team in verifying the patient's name, medical record number, date of birth, procedure, laterality, meaning which side of the body the procedure takes place, and medications to be administered prior to incision. You may do something similar when you walk out your front door. You pat your pockets and you say out loud, phone, wallet, keys. The intentional awareness overlaps with mindfulness, which we mentioned in a previous video. Another way to make a good habit more obvious is to couple it with another habit you already perform. For example, I stretch every morning without fail, but my meditation practice isn't as consistent. By coupling the two and telling myself that after stretching I will meditate, I'm much more likely to actually meditate on any given day. The converse of this is to make a bad habit less obvious. If you find yourself picking up your phone to see who slid into your DMs when you should be studying, then a simple fix would be to move your phone to another room or keep it in your backpack out of sight. When it's not in your pocket or on the desk, you'll be far less likely to mindlessly and automatically just pick it up. Remember, discipline isn't about having tremendous self-control. Rather, it's about structuring your life in a way that does not require massive amounts of willpower. It's incredibly easy for me to avoid eating junk food simply because I don't keep Twinkies or Ho-Hos in my apartment. The second law is to make it attractive. To make a habit more attractive, we have a few tools at our disposal. First, consider temptation bundling. You're more likely to find a behavior attractive if you get to do one of your favorite things at the same time. I love the TV show Top Gear, and now the Grand Tour, so I tell myself that I can watch the TV show as long as I want, but I must stretch and do mobility exercises while doing so. The formula for temptation bundling is After this current habit, I will do the habit I need, and after the habit I need, I will do the habit I want. So let's say you want to cut down on your Instagram use. We could say, after I pull out my phone, I will do 10 burpees. That's the habit you need. And after I do 10 burpees, I will check Instagram, and that's the habit you want. Now, second, be mindful of who you spend time with. As they say, you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. We aren't consciously choosing our earliest habits, but rather imitating them from those around us. If you want to build better study habits, associate with a group of students where effective studying is the norm. This is also why your mother was concerned about what company you kept while hanging out at school. If you hang out with friends that are up to no good, chances are you'll also end up performing similar behaviors. And third, be very careful with your use of language. This ties in with the concept of taking an identity, like in our previous example about trying to stop drinking versus not being a drinker. When you catch yourself saying you have to do something, swap the word have with get. So rather than I have to exercise, try I get to exercise. And rather than I have to study human anatomy and physiology, try I get to study human anatomy and physiology. I mean, after all, it's actually super fascinating, so acknowledge the opportunity to study something like this rather than accounting or taxes. The third law is to make it easy. People often ask about how long it takes to create a habit. Some say 30 days, others say 6 weeks. It really depends on the study you want to cite. But rather than focusing on the duration of a habit, consider that it's more relevant to ask the frequency. It's the total number of repetitions. So if you perform one habit twice per day and a second habit twice per week, the one you do 2 times per day is more likely to stick much quicker. You won't always want to study or exercise or eat healthy, but rather than brute forcing your way to adhering to your desired behaviors, which has a high failure rate, making the habit easy and effortless is much more likely to work. To do this, we want to reduce the friction of good habits and increase the friction associated with bad habits. Consider your environment. Reduce the friction of working out by joining a gym that is on your way home from school. Even better, set out your workout clothes, shoes, gym bag, and water bottle the night before. If you find yourself watching too much TV, remove the batteries from your remote control each time you finish, and therefore the next time you want to mindlessly grab the remote, you'll be much more conscious of your behavior, and you'll catch yourself. Do I really need to watch TV in this moment? The greater the friction, the less likely the habit. Now, it's amazing how little friction is required to prevent unwanted behavior. Simply moving my phone to another room or out of sight drastically helps me focus when studying or doing Pomodoros. Realize that a habit must be established before it can be improved. Don't try perfecting your habit from the start, just try getting it to stick. Oftentimes, we are overzealous with our new habits and overdo them, and we burn ourselves out. For example, let's say you understand the benefits of daily journaling and want to implement that. If you expect yourself to write too much, it quickly feels like a chore. The key is to stay below that threshold where it feels like work. Clear suggests using the technique of habit shaping to scale your habit back up toward your ultimate goal. So for example, let's say you want to become a morning person. In phase 1, you would get in the habit of being home by 10 p.m. every night. And once that's mastered, you move on to phase 2, which is having all your devices with screens turned off by 10 p.m. And in phase 3, you get into bed by 10, and in phase 4, lights out by 10 p.m. In phase 5, you wake up at 6 a.m. every day. The inverse of making it easy is to make it difficult, or rather make it impossible. The single most effective way to do this is by using a commitment device. A commitment device relies on making a choice in advance that restricts our ability to carry out that bad habit in the future. It increases the friction of performing bad habits. So for example, my phone automatically enters do not disturb mode every evening until the mid-morning the next day, so I cannot actually see notifications or be distracted. Similarly, you can lock in good habits by making decisions in advance. For example, buying blackout curtains or an eye mask facilitates good sleep hygiene. Using technology to automate your habits is a highly reliable and effective way to reinforce your good behaviors. So for example, you can automate your smart lights to turn on every morning at 6 a.m. to help you get up and prevent you from snoozing your alarm clock. That is actually what I currently do. The fourth and final law is to make it satisfying, to keep you coming back for more. So those first 3 laws of behavior change, to make it obvious, make it attractive, and make it easy, they increase the odds that a behavior will be performed this time. The fourth law of behavior change is about increasing the odds that the behavior will be performed the next time. Generally speaking, what is rewarded is repeated and what is punished is avoided. We call this operant conditioning. With bad habits, the immediate outcome usually feels good, but the ultimate outcome feels bad. And with good habits, it's the opposite. The immediate outcome is not so pleasant, but the ultimate outcome feels great. So how can we use our evolutionary machinery to our advantage? Simple. Add a little bit of immediate pleasure to the habits that pay off in the long run, and add a little bit of immediate pain to the ones that don't. Let's say you want to cut out the habit you have of binging Netflix every afternoon after school. You could immediately reward yourself for avoiding this habit by instead hanging out with friends, which is a much more fruitful endeavor in relaxation and rejuvenation. Eventually, you'll experience intrinsic rewards, like increased energy or a better mood. And at this point, you'll be less concerned with chasing those secondary rewards. The identity itself will become the reinforcer. Another tool that should be in your repertoire is habit tracking. Habit tracking is powerful because it uses multiple laws of behavior change simultaneously. It makes a behavior obvious, attractive, and satisfying. One of my favorite things about habit tracking is that it keeps you focused on the process and not the result. You're not trying to be the student that sets the curve in biology. You're just focusing on being the type of student that studies for 5 hours every day with active learning methods. There are some issues with habit tracking. It feels like an extra step, like more work. So to get around that, here are a few tips. First, automate the measurements whenever possible. I bought a smart scale that automatically syncs with my phone. It measures my weight and body fat percentage in just a few seconds, and I don't even have to tap anything. It just automatically syncs. It's not necessarily the most accurate, but it is very precise, which is actually more important for this use case. Second, manual tracking should only be done for your most important habits. Don't track every little habit, otherwise you'll feel overwhelmed and will stop tracking anything. And third, record the measurements after the habit occurs. Using stacking in this manner makes you much more likely to actually track the habit consistently. That being said, be careful not to grow too obsessed with your habit tracking. You may find yourself caring more about reaching 10,000 steps per day rather than being healthy and active. We optimize for what we measure. Therefore, if we choose the wrong measurement, we get the wrong behavior. It's inevitable that you will miss days. You won't be perfect, I guarantee that. Whenever you skip, the key is to remind yourself of a simple rule: never miss twice. Missing once is an accident. Missing twice is the start of a new habit. The inverse of the fourth law is to make it immediately unsatisfying. Because we as humans have strong loss aversion, this is a very effective tool. It's much more compelling to avoid losing $100 than to gain $100. The more concrete and immediate the negative consequence, the more likely it is to influence your behavior. To do this, we turn to the habit contract, which is a tool to add social cost to any unwanted behavior. It makes the cost of violating your promises public and painful. You could, for example, set up a betting pool with your friends to get into shape or train for a certain endurance event. By failing to meet your predefined parameters and rules, the friend has the liberty to donate X number of dollars to an anti-charity, which is a group whose purposes you do not support. Or alternatively, release humiliating photos of you that you've provided them as ammo to help you stick to your goal. There is a lot in this lesson, and taking this to heart and implementing it will pay compounding dividends. Refer back to this video as frequently as you need to make sure you have a thorough understanding of the steps required to effectively and systemically change your habits.